So hello and welcome. This is the summit for the book, The Power of Releasing Judgment. And I am joined today by #1 best-selling author, Keisha Clark, a radio show host and a cat extraordinaire. And who knows what else magic will happen in Keisha's life. I'm very grateful to have you here. Welcome, Keisha.
Thank you, Erica. I am so excited to be getting to play with you and this project. It's amazing.
Okay, let's talk about sex.
I'm happy to do that.
Let's talk about sex, baby.
There you go.
Keisha wrote a chapter, in case you think we're insane, Keisha wrote a chapter called, was it The Judgment of Sex or something?
The Judgment of Sex.
Yeah, so what do you mean by that? And how can we be more expansive in that space and kind of just give us sort of the skinny on that?
Yeah, well, when you invited me to play with the book, I asked the book, what would be a contribution. And there were some things going on in my life at that particular point as well, that this energy was up, and it was all around sex. And so when I received the invitation and I started to just sort of play with questions around it, it was the judgment of sex. And it was kind of interesting. I had just, before your invitation came through, I had just been looking at the story of the Judgment of Paris, which is into the gods and goddesses and mythology. And it was fascinating, some of the things that I had seen in the story that the first time I had read it, which was a few years back, hadn't really jumped out at me. And so when the title, The Judgment of Sex, came up, I was like, oh. And really, initially, it was all of the judgment that is really involved in sex, the way it's done in our modern era, and really the way it's been done for a long time. And I have a radio show. I'm a radio show host, amongst other things. And one of the shows I did last year, the topic was, are we eating for sex? And when I was doing a little bit of research for that, I looked up the etymology of the word sex, and I was really surprised to find out that the early applications of the word were actually really about separating the sexes as female or male.
Okay.
I thought that was really fascinating, that it was, and I talk about this a little bit in the chapter, in the way that it was applied. The energy of that word, to me, has never really been about separation organically. And at the same time, the way that it's used and the way that it's applied, in many cases, there is a great deal of separation in the way that it's used. And that really requires judgment to make that separation. And then, all of the judgment about bodies, all of the judgment about the rightness and the wrongness of sex, and what it is supposed to be and what it shouldn't be. And it's amazing. So, of course, one chapter is really not, we're not able to explore all of the avenues. But this is kind of the stories, the memories that came up in relationship to what I was asking this chapter.
I had the most interesting thing showed up for me today, because
Yeah.
as I was getting ready to interview you, I had the strangest memory. And so now I'm just going to blab, because
Sure.
I know it ties in.
Yeah.
It's not sex per se. Sorry, everybody. I'm waiting on the edge of their seat for that totally moment. But it's like, throughout my life, there were these family gatherings. And the family I was born into was very athletic and slender. And I was thick and Italian. And so I basically when I'd walk in, I could just feel the oceans of judgment at my body. Mm-hmm. And it was made wrong just so from the beginning.
Yeah.
And so then every year we did like Easter, Thanksgiving, Christmas, and birthday. And I would seriously dread like the walking in.
Yeah.
Like the not having seen them in a few months, and now, unless I had lost weight, And then that would be the first comment, would be, oh my goodness, you look so good, you've lost weight. And even if I'd only lost like 10 pounds, like that would be the first comment. Like it would never be,
Right.
I was a writer, so it would never be what have you written about, or
Of course.
what lives have you changed, or
Right.
what awards have you won, which I don't, I was really blessed as a writer. There'd always be a lot going on, but it would always be the body. And so I grew to seriously like despise that family interaction. And I'm curious because you address this in the chapter. You talk about that and shedding that. Now, for me, it took certain family members to die to go away, which I don't think is
That's one way.
something I'd recommend. I don't know anything like cancer and stuff like that. And some of them moved to different parts of the country, so it just ended up being where they were all in different, where that ritual went away when I was about 40. So that came in so vividly before we were going to talk. And so I just kind of wanted to ask you to comment on like, what kind of tools can we do and how can we negotiate those kinds of things? Because you really address that in your chapter quite beautifully, if not exactly the same.
Well, and how much of that is going on every day? Like that was one of the realizations or the awarenesses that has really become stronger for me as I played with it, is really, I mean, the very first thing when we're born, when we come through that birth canal, if there's no major medical trauma or thing going on, the very first thing is, what is it, a boy or is it a girl? And so from the very beginning, there is technically this judgment that is begun to be flowed to us or directed at us. And then if it's a boy, certain things are done in relationship to if it's a boy, and if it's a girl body, certain things are done in relationship to that. And then there's all these other things that go along with whatever the bodies are born as. And then of course, which we'd have to go into a much longer interview to talk about bodies that are born with both parts, all multiple gender expression, and that's a whole different kind of direction. But there's still judgment. There's all of this. What are you? And so from the very beginning, there's an identity attached to the sex of us. And then as we begin to explore more, and sex for me has, for a long time, has been something that only recently have I begun to express. Sex was really always more than simply a particular behavior that we do or a specific set of rules that we play by. Sex for me includes everything, the being together with someone, the being present, what you and I are doing right now. There's a sex energy, there's a camaraderie, a communion, a kindredship, and there's a joy in that, and there is something that we are sharing. And so it doesn't require us to do physiological behavior or physical behavior of specific types of expression for us to really be gifting and receiving with each other. And the energy of sex, before we put all of these definitions on it, is really what I've begun to play more with recently in my life and in my work. And so growing up in our families, we each so easily can take on these roles, and we become identified by our gender or gender preference or our gender identity. And then we become identified again by what people's judgment of that is and what their own issues about their own sex and sexualness and sexuality is and has been. So there's so much to kind of that we have to work through. And as children, how aware are we of energetically what's going on? Even though we may not have words to express it,
right.
How aware are we of that energy? And it is everywhere present. It is constant. And I, for the longest time, had not acknowledged that. And then when I began to play with bodies in my early 20s, I was licensed as a massage therapist, and then I began to add other hands-on bodywork modalities to my practice. And it's amazing to see what people carry in their bodies based on their judgments about their, not only their bodies, but bodies in general. And it's just, it's enormous what all of these rules and regulations that we've placed on our bodies and on the energy of sex. And it's just so much more than what a lot of people allow it to be. And so with that, walking into that room, I so get that. um,
I know.
yeah,
The second that I felt like 23 again. Like I can remember that,
yeah,
and it's really fascinating because the judgment seems to then beget more, right? It's like then it begets more, then it begets more.
absolutely, absolutely.
So what would
And
you say about that?
it's what's really interesting, kind of weird and interesting and intriguing to me is how I think of certain relatives in my family, and there was almost this compulsiveness to the judgment. And then what it would do is it would sort of like the intensity would build, and it was almost like it spun in on itself, and then it created more and more intensity until it became this really volatile energy, and then it had to be like projected, right? You know, like gunfire or
Wow.
other things that you might relate to sex. And I was always fascinated by that. It's like, what is it that motivates a person or creates that circumstance for a person that they have to go there? Like they just have to go to that space of judging someone for their body's type or size or shape or portion or how
Right.
we dress, you know. And that has always just intrigued me so, because it never came naturally to me, you know.
Right. See, for me, I don't do that. Like,
Exactly.
I don't
Exactly.
even, because I see the aura and the energy and the spirit of a being.
Right.
So I might not even notice if they weigh 100 pounds less than this or 200 pounds more than that. Like,
Right.
I don't even like, honestly, it's kind of like when someone apologizes for being messy
Yeah.
and they go to their space. And
Yeah.
honestly, I don't care.
Yeah.
Like I barely see it. Like I mean, if I can't sit down for the garbage, that's one thing. But
Right.
it's just like kind of they haven't cleaned up or whatever. Like honestly, I don't. I'm into
Yeah.
their space. Like I can't be that person. So it's kind of interesting to me. And then you also touched on something else that I was kind of interested in. Um, and this was something actually that I think might have shown up in this book that you also wrote. A beautiful composition. It's
Yes.
walking in as one's potent self. Like,
Yeah.
how can we sort of be that as we become, not so tied down by the baggage?
Yeah.
I do find myself being like I don't know how to say it comfortably, like being more sexual or being more
Yeah.
sexually attractive.
Yeah.
I keep saying like in my head, how can this happen at my age? Like how can I be this age and be so attractive? And it's very strange to me to go through this evolution right now at this age of at this time in this fifth decade.
Mm-hmm.
Like nothing really prepared me for this.
Right.
Can you just tell us, like, as people are shifting, because when they're reading this book, they're going to shift. I mean,
Yes.
really, you're going to shift when you read the book. It's going to
Yes.
happen.
It's
Then,
amazing.
as you become more sexual, just kind of share with us what you advise, or as you start shedding, like, what kinds of tools or what things can we do or be in the world to be,
More present with that.
yeah,
More with
just
that.
to be
More
more
ease.
allowance of it, maybe?
Yeah. Allowance is a great word. Yeah.
Yeah.
So one of the first, and for me, this has kind of happened in different rounds or cycles, kind of, if you will, because there's so much, and even when you know a whole lot, and you're aware of a whole lot, it's like there's still more, that you're going to discover, and you're going to go, oh shit, you'll have that flashback to when you were 2 years old and somebody forced you to eat the peas because you couldn't leave the table until you ate all the peas. Those kinds of things will all start to kind of wave at you.
Mhm.
And so firstly, what I would offer and invite people to do is to please make an agreement with yourself to be kind to you, no
Mm.
matter what comes up,
That's
no
nice.
matter who says anything when you're on this journey, while you're on this journey, or while you're in your process. Um, make the agreement with yourself to be kind with you. And
Mm.
if you have no idea what kindness truly is, just begin to ask, what is the kindness that I can be here?
Wow.
And what kindness can I be to me and to my body right here and right now? And just, wow, just that, like, it begins to
Wow.
exhale. And you may perceivably notice it, that your body will begin to respond. And our bodies, oh, our bodies are so amazing. Our bodies will show us anything and everything we ask them to show us, truly. And it's funny because I went through like 20 something years, my first almost 20 years, I guess, in the body work, in the field of healing arts, and hands-on body work. And I know a lot about bodies. and and this was something, when this began to really occur, or really kind of sizzle and pop open for me, it was even more amazing than what I could have predicted, or what I could have told people it would be. So my first thing is always around kindness. And a lot of what I'm also aware of, and what I also play with, is how much, because how aware are we and how aware have we been our whole life, how much of what we are wrestling with is even really our issue to begin with.
Right.
Right? So, like, I always heard people talk about bodies as something disgusting and nasty, and you shouldn't show very much of them. And, I heard a lot of that where I was growing up. When I began to really play with some of this, it's like, well, that's not true for me.
Mm.
I've never thought of bodies as ugly or
Yeah.
disgusting. Like, bodies have always been the most sacred, divine work of art to me.
Wow.
And I remember when I was in my core classes before I got my licensing for body work, I was fascinated with everything I learned, like all of the academic information. And as I made it cognitive, it was just stunning to me how bodies are designed and what bodies can do at a physiological level. And then when we get into how bodies can use energy and move energy and channel energy and share energy and activate energies, even more amazement, for me. So to me, bodies have always been this beautiful, amazing, sacred, divine vessel.
Wow.
And what I have become more aware of cognitively just recently, like in the last couple of years, is that our bodies are so in tune with the earth, with other creatures. This creature that hosts our being is really pretty phenomenal. So the kindness of our bodies, if we would be willing to acknowledge that our bodies have been with us through thick and thin,
Right.
and if you're watching this and you're in a body, your body is still here with you. you know and many of the people who are listening to this might have already heard this, but it's like how it bears repeating. If we treated anyone else the way we've treated our bodies, they would be long gone, but our bodies are still here.
Yeah.
They haven't broken down. And
Yeah.
for some of us, there may have been some things along the way that you may have stumbled, and there may be some things even now that are medically or technically termed as something that's wrong with your body. And I'm just going to ask you, is that really true? Is something wrong with you or your body? And what do you know?
Love it. Love it. Thank you so much, Keisha. This was a fabulous interview.
Thank you.
Everyone who's listening, go get the book,
Yes.
Power of Releasing Judgment. And Keisha, give us at least one URL.
Oh gosh, an easy one. You know what? come play with my radio show. It's
Okay.
A2 Zen, and so that's A, the number 2, Z as in zebra, EN dot FM. And you can just go to the host page and click on my picture and go to my radio page. You can access all my archives, and several of my episodes are with Erica Glessing.
We have so much fun.
I love her. I love her.
Very entertaining.
Yes, yes. And then from there, you can find other ways to play with me as well. So yeah, that would be a fun place to start, and I would love for folks to come and check that out. And if my shows don't blow your hair back, there are plenty of other hosts on that station that you can play with. So yeah,
it's a great
station. What kindness can you be to you and your body now and forever?
Love it. Thank you.
Thank you, Erica. Thank you for putting this together and being the gift and the invitation you be. Thank you. And Lily says thank you too.